So in this video, we're going to take a look at John 2, and particularly the story about Jesus changing water into wine. And so before I read the text, I'm going to just make a couple of observations about John chapter 2 itself. So starting here in chapter 2, three things start to occur. One is that Jesus' glory is going to be manifested in actions and teachings. Jesus' opponents are going to grow in their conflict with him. And Jesus brings the old into a new culmination. Now, especially on this third point, it is important to stress that bringing something old into a new culmination does not mean dispensing of the old. The old continues, but the old just continues within the context of the new. And that's an important point to bear in mind. Oftentimes people think of old means once the new has arrived, the old is dispensed, but that's not the concept really for John. Here, what has been old is valued, but there is something in which this old anticipates, which is fulfilled or completed or culminates in the new. So this is what we got going on here in chapter 2. In chapter 2, we are presented then with two kinds of celebrations, each with their own kind of rich symbolism that are used. One is a wedding, so verses 1 through 12, and then we have really Jewish deliverance, and that is with the idea of the temple and the cleaning of the temple, quote, cleaning of the temple, in verses 13 through 25. So let's go ahead and take a look here at John 2. I'll read the text first. This is from the NIV. On the third day, a wedding took place at Cana in Galilee. Jesus' mother was there, and Jesus and his disciples had also been invited to the wedding. When the wine was gone, Jesus' mother said to him, "They have no more wine." "Woman, why do you involve me?" Jesus replied. "My hour has not yet come." His mother said to the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." Nearby stood 6 stone water jars, the kind used by Jews for ceremonial washing, each holding from 20 to 30 gallons. Jesus said to the servants, "Fill the jars with water." So they filled them to the brim. Then he told them, "Now draw some out and take it to the master of the banquet." They did so. And the master of the banquet tasted the water that had been turned into wine. He did not realize where it had come from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew. Then he called the bridegroom aside and said, "Everyone brings out the choice wine first, and then the cheaper wine after the guests have had too much to drink. But you have saved the best till now." What Jesus did here in Cana of Galilee was the first of the signs through which he revealed his glory, and his disciples believed in him. After this, he went down to Capernaum with his mother and brothers and his disciples. There they stayed for a few days. All right, so making here some quick observations about this text and about what John is doing in recounting this event. So this is going to be the first of 7 signs. The other 6 that we come across in the gospel is the temple cleansing, the healing of the nobleman's son in chapter 4, the healing of the lame man in chapter 5, the feeding of the multitude in chapter 6, the healing of the blind man in chapter 9, and then the raising of Lazarus in chapter 11. While Jesus' signs point to God revealing himself and his work in Jesus, they do not lead the crowd of Jews to believe. Now, we do find that his disciples believed in him, but it's important to see that signs have a limited value in John's gospel as to leading to faith. They are really more for those who have already come to believe. Now, it may be here that we're supposed to take verse 11 is that the disciples look at the signs and believed in him. But we're going to find out that the disciples, too, do not understand the signs sufficiently enough to really grasp the real identity of Jesus. They come to believe in him to a level, but that is going to need to be enriched later on in the narrative. Now, it says that on the third day, the third day actually doesn't make sense in the narrative that we have already, when John has already mentioned 4 previous days. So we're not quite sure on the third day of what. On the third day of a week? Is this the third day of Jesus' ministry? What is the third day reference in terms of the timeline? But it may not be so much about the counting days as it is the symbolic importance of the third day, and certainly how that would be connected or conjure up the notions of Jesus' resurrection, which happened on the third day. So in John's gospel, Jesus' mother is never named Mary. It's a curious thing. We have her here in chapter 2, and then we're going to have her later on in at the end of the gospel. Jesus' mother is going to be present at Jesus' crucifixion. This is a unique aspect of John's gospel. The other gospels do not indicate this. And it's interesting that this provides something of an inclusio in the story with Jesus' mother being present at these events. And once again, the fact that she is there, and the fact that there is this dialogue between them, the fact that it's on the third day, kind of conjures up that this episode of changing water into wine and Jesus' crucifixion should be probably read in light of each other. In other words, there's something being mirrored in Jesus' crucifixion with this. So maybe that the way in which Jesus takes something that is old and brings it to its culmination is seen actually in the crucifixion itself. So the new wine, as it were, is what Jesus offers in his death. But why Jesus' mother is never named is a curious thing. We do have other Marys in John's gospel. We have Mary Magdalene, and then we're going to have Mary, who is a sister of Martha and Lazarus. So maybe it's to avoid the confusions of different Marys. So it's a curiosity as to how we are supposed to look at the fact that the mother is not named. So as I said, she's here and at the beginning of his ministry and at his crucifixion. So Jesus' rebuff of his mother in verse 4, "Woman, why do you involve me?" Seems rude to address your mother as woman. But it may be consistent with the theme of John that Jesus is not understood, even by his family, which we will see later on in John chapter 7, with his brothers not really understanding who he is. Here, Mary thinks he is just someone who can deal with a problem. They've run out of wine. You brought your friends with you, and all the wine has gotten drunk. And so what are you going to do about this? And so I don't know if we see Mary here as someone who believes Jesus can perform a miracle, or he's just going to take care of it. He's going to do something. And so she's not really demonstrating, as it were, faith in Jesus' identity at this point. So she's not lifted up as she is in Luke's gospel. Mark's gospel just has Mary and Jesus' family as thinking Jesus is crazy, and wanting to try and pull him away when he is teaching a group of people. Thinks that he is behaving in ways that are bringing shame to them. In Matthew, Mary doesn't really get to have any speaking roles, and Mary is not really highlighted with any particular faith in Jesus, though Mark's presentation of her is probably downplayed a little bit in Matthew's gospel. Luke has the best presentation of Mary, not only in the gospel but also in Acts as a member belonging to the community of followers of Jesus. And then John has this interesting side of Mary, request being honored by Jesus, and now Jesus showing affection or care for his mother at the end. In John's Gospel, the term hour primarily refers to Jesus' moment of glorification, which is his death and resurrection. However, the word hour can have other ideas or other suggestions about it. Some might see here that the word hour, that his hour has not yet come, might refer to his ministry, where he reveals himself. The hour of revealing who he is has not yet arrived. But, in light that this passage is probably reflecting the crucifixion, I would think that Jesus is anticipating that. So Jesus probably in John's Gospel has the foreknowledge already at this stage of he's going to have to die. Now, and notice that here we've got that there are 6 stone water jars. It's interesting to mention that they are made out of stone. And one of the things that's interesting about stone, it is, according to Jewish purity laws, the material helps to prevent the water inside from being contaminated. Other types of materials that one might construct jars could be such that uncleanness can penetrate through that material and then contaminate what is contained inside. But stone supposedly does not do that, and so it doesn't transmit that ceremonial impurity. So, in other words, this is water that is used for ceremonial washing. It's supposed to be pure water. Somebody wants to wash their hands. And so again, there's something here about cleansing, being cleansed, and the role of water in cleansing, which again gets picked up several times in John's Gospel. And here, this has a limited use to take care of ceremonial uncleanness, but of course, Jesus' death is going to take care of a deeper impurity or uncleanness. So it's greater than that. In the Old Testament, marriage is oftentimes associated with the theme of restoration. You can see this in Isaiah 54 and Isaiah 62. And so since Jesus' death is also something that is involved in the restoration of God's people, having this marriage as the background, once again, might have a symbolic meaning for the purposes of John's Gospel. Now, the wine is most likely symbolic of the salvation that Jesus offers. In Jewish literature, it symbolized eschatological salvation. So you see several references that I have here from Isaiah, Jeremiah, Hosea, Joel, Amos, but also in pseudepigraphical materials, such as First Enoch, the Second Apocalypse of Baruch. And so what we find here is wine would be commonly thought of as the thing that suggests when God's salvation comes, when he restores the land to Israel, and when the land becomes productive, there should be abundance of wine. And so we've got these 6 stone water jars. It indicates how many gallons of water these contain. And so a great deal of wine is produced with 20 to 30 gallons. For a possible messianic connotation, one might want to look at Genesis 49, 10 through 11. It's not quite clear that providing the wine indicates that Jesus is the Messiah, as much as Jesus brings about the salvation of Israel. But if one wanted to see, well, this is a sign to indicate Jesus is the Messiah, one might think that someone like the author of John's Gospel may have Genesis 49, 10 through 11 in mind. Now, the steward and the bridegroom did not know where the wine comes from. And so this idea of knowledge is important in John's Gospel, we're always going to get a play between what people think they know and what is actual. And so, very oftentimes, there are people who think they know who Jesus is. They think they know his identity. They call him by different things, but what they name Jesus, what they call Jesus, what they think Jesus is doing will show that they do not know who he really is. And so, in this case, we've got this steward and bridegroom, and they don't know where it comes from, but it is servants who know what has happened. So there's kind of in and out. There are certain people who are in, who are the servants, and those who are on the outside. And so that's being played here. The salvation offered through Jesus then is the good wine that is kept until now. So this statement that is being made here by the master of the banquet, what he claims that there is an irony that's going on here. You are talking about wine, and that the wine is good, but in actual, it is the Jesus that it has been kept until now. It is what Jesus offers as salvation that is the good wine that God has waited, as it were, to bring about until this moment. So we'll end that look here at the water into wine account, and hopefully that has been helpful to provide some ways in which this story may have had some symbolic meaning for the author.